This conference will now be recorded.
Here's a mic here. Do we want to turn it off or what? Turn what here?
Bill, are you with us yet?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. It is 10 o'clock, and this meeting of the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission is called to order. I'd like to establish a quorum. Please identify yourself. Commissioners.
This is Bill, present.
Stephen Cooper.
Frank Thorwald, we have a quorum. Is there any conflicts of interest? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 2, discussion and consideration and possible vote by the AZOGCC on minutes from the January 15th meeting and the January public meeting on January. First of all, is there any changes or on the January 15th, 2001 public meeting?
None. Bill?
Yes, Commissioner. Commissioner Firebrand, did you have some changes to that public meeting minutes?
Negative. Bill?
Okay. And then we also have the Ranger January 15th development hearing. Anybody have any changes to that? Do I have a motion to accept the minutes from both of those meetings?
I will so move.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. The motion carries. The minutes are approved. Let's move on to item 3, report by the Oil and Gas Administrator on recent well and other activities. Dennis?
Okay, well, the first item on that line item is ASU's helium research, helium perspectives research. I see that Kirk Jalbert and Noah Brewis are both on the line. I'm just going to turn this part of the meeting over to Noah to make a presentation, discuss what her PhD thesis is all about. Dr. Jalbert can interject as need be, and then I think at least the commission and staff will have some questions after your presentation and discussion. So take it away, Noah.
Thanks so much. Thank you for making time for us. Many of you probably already have seen my face, or at least my name. I'm the PhD student who's been showing up to these public meetings for the last couple of years. And Dr. Jalbert here is my advisor. We're kind of gonna, I'll just quickly describe the project and leave time for any questions. And at that time, Dr. Jalbert can also address any concerns that people have about the research or questions thereof. So in its simplest form, my research question is, how are people making sense of helium extraction in Arizona? And that comes from various stakeholder groups we're engaging with. So the Institutional Review Board at our institution, ASU, disallows me from sharing any names of participants, but I can say that we're working with people from members of various groups within, concerned citizens, regulatory agencies, and industry. I'm well aware there are many more groups outside of that too, including consumers or scientists who advise on how to extract or who then use the helium at the end at its end use. But we're sticking to those 3 groups for the sake of being able to do this in a comprehensive way. So the research itself at this stage is going to be building, we'll be building these short videos that describe topics that we have so far identified are either controversial or, or there's differences of opinion or perspectives about these topics. So the examples would be helium extraction, geology, well spacing exemptions, permit processing, things that are either, not well understood across all the groups or that people have various perspectives on. So the process for developing those videos, and at this point, those videos will not include anyone's names or faces. It's like hand sketch drawings or animations with a narrator voiceover that represents these views so that everyone maintains anonymity. But the idea is we identify a topic, develop a script based on the data that we've collected, including interview data, these public meetings, background research, documents, etc. And then we pass those scripts out, this like narrator's script out to these participants, anyone who wants to join the study. And those participants will give feedback saying, this language is misleading, this topic is disagreeable. And we find these points, these really fine points of disagreement between parties, and then kind of like figure out ways to either get everyone on the same page or highlight in the video, that there are differing views and here are parties, without naming any names, here are groups maybe that represent these views. And it's iterative, so it could take a while to get to that stage. And the point really is to create this resource, this informational resource that various groups have provided feedback on, that is public facing videos. And kind of B, it offers an opportunity to really pinpoint and highlight these areas that are creating issues between these groups. And then after academics, full disclosure, we will likely publish on the methods, again, without using any names, on how effective or ineffective they were to broker a dialogue between parties. I think that's about as simple as I can, as short as I can keep it. And I guess I'll leave the rest to any questions. And at this point, Dr. Jalbert will also probably jump in.
No, you also had a couple of visuals. I don't know if you wanted to share those.
Yeah, I don't know if we can do that on WebEx.
Okay.
Like a...
should be able to give you control to present. Frank, is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, you should have control to present now.
Ooh, I think it might make me restart through my system preferences. The visuals were kind of a supplement to what I'm saying, which is that we won't be using anyone's faces or names in these videos. So I had like an example of my sketch drawing, these animations for the video. That was the main helpful visual. The others show the network of stakeholders and the ones we're focusing on, which again is just for now concerned citizen groups, regulatory agencies or officials, and industry operators or members.
Maybe a good example. So of course, this is all in preliminary stage, so we haven't actually published any versions in a public facing space. But if you were to go on the ASU website and look for Dr. Andrew Maynard's series of Risk Bites videos, and he has a whole bunch of them out there related to artificial intelligence and nanotechnology and all these different things. And it's really simple ways to be able to communicate narratives around different kinds of science and technology issues. That's essentially the model or the method that we're going to be using. So you can see a really good visual example of that on Dr. Andrew Maynard's websites. I think it's the Risk Innovation Lab. I think that's the name
the
of it.
videos are called Risk Bites.
Yeah.
No, this is Frank Thorwald, Chairman. No, are you asking anything of the commission here? I know you've sent to the commission some material. for our involvement. So could you explain that?
Yes, of course. So at this stage, we are still reaching out to participants to join the study and inform these videos as they take shape. And the more representatives from these stakeholder groups, the better, because I know that they're nuanced and any one commissioner won't have exactly the same view as another commissioner. And I want to represent that as best as possible in these videos. So I invite participation from the commission, and I have, I don't know what the best way is. I have an email address I can share, but I likely will also reach out to each individual commissioner and share. There's a consent form that basically outlines how we protect your name and likeness and anonymity through our institutional review board, who to report to if we're behaving unethically. It's entirely for the participants' protection, and it describes the study. This email I'll send will describe the study a little bit. Yeah, I think that's the ask, is that when I email you, please consider responding, and feel free to ask any questions at any stage. It outlines also that you can discontinue participation at any stage. So.
Staff, commissioners, do you have any questions for either party?
Mr. Chairman, just a comment. I'd like to thank you both for your efforts in doing this. We really would like to have discussions and development of helium in Arizona. And I kind of feel this is a lot like Hollywood. There's no such thing as bad press. So thank you for your efforts, and whatever you do, I will cooperate with you. I hope that if you do a caricature of me, that at least you make it 15, 20 pounds lighter.
They'll all be stick figures, so
We've
you'll
all
all
gained
look
the
the same.
COVID 10, right? I gained 10 pounds this year, so.
Administrator Turner, I think you had some comments too, questions.
I was waiting to see if any of the other commissioners wanted to weigh in on questions or comments before I said anything. Does Bill Fireman have any comments? Guess not. Frank, do you have anything else you wanted to add? From your perspective?
William, Bill, Firebrand, are you still online, or you're muted? We're not hearing you.
Frank, was that it's kind of garbled on my end?
You were distorted there. Could you repeat? Commissioner Firebrand, we're having trouble hearing.
Yeah, I tell you, I'm really getting garbled. I'm going to exit and come back in, and let's see if that helps. It's really difficult to, it's just so garbled I can't follow. So I'm going to exit and come back in. Go ahead and continue.
That's unfortunate. Okay.
Let's wait just a moment while he comes back in.
Yes,
yeah.
We've lost
Yes,
our
let's wait.
until he comes back in.
Frank, I'm going to step away for a minute while Bill is trying to log back in. I'll be right back.
Okay.
In the meantime, I'm going to add my email address to the chat and make myself available to, if anyone else on the call also has questions about the study or interest in participating, I'd love to hear from anyone. So I'll just leave my email address in the chat here.
Thanks. So I'll do the same as well while you're doing that. I'm also adding a link to the Risk Innovation Lab that has a few examples of methodology that we were describing. Not so much in terms of doing the broker dialogue that Noah described, but at least what the visuals of the films will look like.
Commissioner Frybrand, I can see you're back on. Do you have any questions? Hearing none, let me ask a couple. I know there's been some concern by staff and some of the other commissioners with regard to some of the things that have been stated in the past with respect to fair and equal treatment of the commission. And I was wondering if you could, one of the two of you could address those concerns.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So just some preamble, Frank and I had a really productive conversation this morning prior to the meeting. And so if we don't have the opportunity time-wise to address the full scope of people's concerns, then perhaps Frank, you can also communicate some of the things that we don't get to today. So I just want to give a little bit of background on how we came into the work, and maybe that will help provide some context in terms of what the sort of perceived miscommunications or misunderstandings might be with the commission. Back in 2018, I had honestly just come to ASU only about a month prior, and received a phone call from a group of concerned citizens up in the Holbrook Basin, and they had been doing a lot of exploration to figure out what helium extraction was about. They were just encountering it for the first time as well. And in the course of their explorations, they had discovered that I had just come to Arizona, had spent about a decade or more out in the shale gas extraction regions in the Marcellus, doing a lot of research in that space, and reached out for technical assistance to try and make sense of all the permits and try and make sense of all the information that they were seeing in industry presentations and things that were coming out of the regulatory agencies in the state. And so we started a process of doing a series of workshops and trying to churn through all of this information. And at that time, Noah and a few other students were also taking a film studies class and were producing a film that was trying to document perspectives of various residents in the basin. And of course, at that time, we only had access to one stakeholder group, right? And this was the concerned citizen groups. And so I know that there were concerns about views that were represented in that film, and I don't necessarily want to walk back from the validity of those concerns, because I think that our process in this entire endeavor has been to try and understand each stakeholder group's perspectives, so then we can figure out where the disagreements are or where there needs to be more information put into the public's hands so that they can understand the process better. But I think that in the course of doing all of that work, myself and Noah and other graduate students that have been involved in this realized that we also really needed to start engaging with other stakeholders in order to do honor to that process of finding, the variety of perspectives and how we get to that. And there was an additional project that we had done too, in which a different graduate student, Catherine Ball, who was working with me, produced a board game that was trying to figure out what these different perspectives were, and players had to play different roles. One person had to play the role of an engineer that was on a rig. Another person had to play the role of an environmental scientist. Another person had to play the role of a concerned citizen, and figure out, like, how do these people that come in with different motivations and different ideas of what helium extraction is about try and figure out how to come to common ground and try and understand what happens with these issues in the Holbrook Basin. And so that was actually a really good start for us, but we realized in doing that as well that we still were only informing that process by one perspective, right? Or just the perspectives that we were able to read through documents and through kind of secondhand accounts. So when Noah came to me and wanted to do this film, this sort of second version of the film project and make it more of a broker dialogue, I was really excited about that. And I've been in full support of her being able to do this, partly because she's been, I think, phenomenal in being able to broker conversations with folks like those on the commission, as well as folks in industry, and trying to bring them to the table. But also because in investigating a lot of different methods in which we could do this in a fair and balanced way, and actually also not necessarily try and weigh towards one opinion or the other, but at least try and identify where there's differences and discrepancies. The brokered filmmaking process seems to be one that works really well in other contexts. And so that's why we thought we would bring it here into this research and see if it could be done effectively. Now, I'll say from, I spent several years sitting on the Environmental Justice Advisory Board for the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, and that was a position that I was directly appointed to by the Secretary of the DEP. And now I'm also in conversation with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, advising them on the formation of their new Office of Public Participation. And the reasons why those relationships worked for us and continue to work for me is because they've been seeing the value of trying to do more out of the box and productive ways of engaging with the public and actually putting informational resources out there. And, one of the things that I said to Frank earlier this morning is that, I'm wholly in support of and would be happy to collaborate with the commission on trying to identify ways in which we could put more information out into the public and around the science of helium extraction, around the regulatory policies. And I know that the commission is actually working behind the scenes and quite hard with the compact and with DEQ and with the geological survey to try and update a lot of that information and update the science and the understanding of the commission and try and put that out. And if there's ways in which we can, not just through NOAA's work, but in other ways, help that process through our understandings of how this has worked in other contexts and in other states, then I'd be happy to provide resources and support as that in that context as well. So, I hope that just as a preamble, that helps people understand a little bit how we came to this point. And I'm happy to address any other specific questions as well.
Commissioners, any additional questions? Comments? Administrator Turner, Administrator Houghton, any questions? Hello?
No questions from me, Frank.
All right. Well, if Marta doesn't have anything, I have a few.
Go ahead, Dennis. Go ahead.
First of all, Dr. Jalbert, you said you can provide examples from this broker filmmaking process or this broker process. Can you send the commission and staff links to where we can look at examples of where this has been successful elsewhere?
I can help with that as well. Yeah, there have been, the initial study was out of Canada, working with in the medical field. They've also done it to tackle issues like homelessness and other large-scale social societal issues. So I can send some examples in a paper.
Okay. Well, it may just be me, but I don't understand what this broker filmmaking process, what does that really mean? What I'm worried about here is that this is just going to turn into another 2020 hosted by Barbara Walters, and it's an agenda that's foisted on everybody, and you really never get to the bottom of what the facts are about these issues.
Well, I guess broker dialogue is just the term that is sort of shorthand to describe the process that Noah just mentioned in our earlier presentation about bringing a variety of stakeholders into the process of reviewing the script and seeing whether or not people agree with certain components of the script. And if they do, then that's identified common ground. And if there's areas in which there needs to have additional sort of cycles of conversation to be able to figure out where the points of difference are. So I'll just take an instance. Fracking is a really hot topic in this entire conversation around helium extraction. And from the research that we've done over the last few years, a lot of the reasons why that's a contentious topic, and certainly I can draw from experience in the shale gas fields as well over the last decade, is that it's about the definitions of fracking, what various people think fracking means and what gets folded into that. And also whether or not those processes are being used in the spaces in which people, in the communities in which people live, and the potential wells that they're concerned about. And ways in which one can start to get down to the bottom of that are, first of all, figuring out what people actually think that word means, and then also getting down to some more detailed information about what processes are being used in these spaces, and do they actually mirror or don't they mirror some of the things that we see in the shale gas community. And so it's both it's a way of being able to produce information in the process, as well as trying to identify what it is that produces the differences and disagreements to begin with, right? And I cannot assure, and in fact, I don't want to assure anybody that we're ever going to find common ground on something like that, because I think it's just really kind of at the heart of, you're never going to find an instance in which everybody's okay with oil and gas extraction in their community. It's just not going to happen, right? But what we can do is, as opposed to having concerns articulated in these big, broad ways in which there's a lack of information, we can get down to the substance and the actual merits of what those conversations are, so that when people put public comments in on a permit or a regulatory change, they're substantive comments on the issues at hand. And in being able to get to that point through the process, I think it's both more useful to the public and it's more useful to the regulatory agencies that are trying to actually navigate that process. And so for that reason, I think that this idea of brokered dialogue it's not a gotcha game, and it's not trying to catch anybody and trying to put anybody into a corner. It's about actually trying to produce more effective public engagement. That is fundamentally what we're trying to achieve here. And it's not the only way, and I don't even necessarily think it's probably even the preferred path of the commission, but it's one in which I think that just through the relationships that we've brokered with different stakeholders across this playing field, it's something that we can offer. It's something that I think that we can provide as an intervention. And as I said, I think in many ways it's the starting point, because if we feel like this actually works, and I think that if the researchers here at ASU, Noah and myself and other graduate students that choose to get involved in this process are able to build a relationship of trust with the commission and with DEQ that we can be a good steward of this process, then I think that will open up additional doors for us to be able to figure out ways in which we can assist the commission and other agencies with trying to do other kinds of brokered information exchanges with the public to try and get to some of these more positive outcomes.
Building trust is a key operative phrase here. Every production I've seen, publication, newspaper articles, etc., that involve Dr. Jalbert and involve Noah Brewis doesn't leave me with a sense of trust whatsoever. So I'm very interested and very concerned about whether this is really going to be a balanced approach. Is the School for the Future of Innovation in Society, what is its mission? Is it just to get to the heart of controversial issues and present both sides and try to get people together to talk about solutions, or is there an agenda there? What's the mission of the School for Future Innovation?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, and this isn't necessarily something that is well understood across society, but I would say that if there's anything that is the primary charge of the researchers in the School for the Future of Innovation in Society, it's trying to dispel the idea that all science is objective and that there's this kind of positivist approach to the ways in which we approach societal problems, that there's opinions, everything is subjective, science is subjective, technology and knowledge is driven by political and social motivations, and the better that we can understand what the relationship is between science and society and culture and technology and how they co-influence one another, then the better off we're going to be in terms of trying to produce better futures. That's why it's called for the future of innovation in society, produce better futures in which we understand the relationships in which technologies emerge across particular pathways, or the reasons in this particular case why oil and gas extraction emerges in particular ways and how people understand that and how different groups come to shape that. And also, to be honest, which groups don't get the opportunity to participate because of structural ways or because of even just geographical distance ways, right? And so we need to also, in the course of thinking about these things, who are the people that need to be at the table, who are the people who are not presently at the table, and how do we, once we get people to the table, have productive dialogue around a whole host of issues. And I would say that is fundamentally what the intentions are of the school, and those are my intentions as well. And I think that the thing that I really just want to be frank with everybody here in the call is that this is not I have a very long history of largely working with community organizations that address this problem. And as you start to grow in your career, you realize that if you want to make the bigger interventions and make the bigger changes in society that you want to see in terms of being able to produce more healthy relationships between agencies and the public, you also need to start sticking your neck out in different places, and that includes working with agencies. And that's the reason why I put myself out for the DEP agency. And I took a lot of slack from my colleagues in the activist community for doing that. And I said, well, if we're not there trying to help these agencies broker better dialogues, then they're just not going to happen. And it's the same reason why I put myself out there as a volunteer to the new Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's Office of Public Participation, because if we don't put ourselves in those spaces, then we're not helping these agencies do what the public wants, which is to be an agency that is more transparent, helping the public become more informed. And while again, they're not necessarily always going to agree, at least they have the information, at least they have the channels of communication available to be able to have those conversations with those agencies. And, as I was relating to Frank previously, in the 10 years that I did research in Pennsylvania, I saw real substantial changes in the ways in which the agencies there over 10 years interacted with the public. And it had some profound changes, I think, in terms of the kinds of relationships that the public was able to have with those regulatory agencies. And I think that, the OGCC is at a very critical point right now in the fact that we're seeing this new industry emerge in the state that just hasn't existed previously. I mean, for all intents and purposes, Arizona is somewhat of a sleeper state in the oil and gas community, and that's starting to no longer be the case. And I really commend the commission in trying to reevaluate the regulatory policies that are on the book and trying to figure out like how do they fill some of the holes that might have been absent related to the Arizona Geological Survey, having less funding and less direct connections to the commission as in the past. And I think these are really good steps. And I think that there's ways of being able to leverage that and build on that and actually, produce some real model opportunities by drawing from some of the examples of other states and other commissions to figure out how to do this well. And so, I'd like to think that just the things that I've said today at least show some good faith in this process and trying to develop a good relationship around these things.
Yeah, Noah said something about it went over it pretty fast. I didn't quite.
Hey, Dennis, you're cutting out. I mean, you need to have a consistent connection to the microphone there.
Here we go again. I'm not sure how to solve that problem.
You're doing fine now.
So just freeze your head and talk, I guess.
Noah mentioned something that she went over it kind of fast. It sounded like she said that the interview data or the notes and so on and so forth would not be made available to the public, or I guess by inference to the commission. I'm wondering if the commission will have access to the information you collect, just as a sanity check to make sure, frankly, to keep you guys honest. Is that available to the commission, or will it be? The background development of the thing,
No, do you want me to take that, or do you want to take
Sure. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So just some background if people aren't familiar with what institutional review board, what their purpose is at universities. Their job is, and really they became pretty mainstream about 30, 40 years ago at universities because there was research that was being done unethically in ways in which it was putting research subjects in harm in a variety of ways, in particular like indigenous communities where they were doing blood studies and then not actually using it for reasons that they had said initially and other things like that. And so whenever we do any kind of research, we have to put our entire proposal in terms of what we intend to do in front of that review board. They evaluate the entire document and some of the requirements that we are held to before they approve our ability to move forward with studies is what kinds of questions are you going to ask of people? How are you going to handle your data? How do you protect people throughout that process to make sure that harm does not come to them? How do you interact with them? What kinds of emails? What are the various, like we have to put our questionnaire in front of them, the entire process. And then what are you going to do with the data when you're done? What kinds of outputs are you going to come up with the study? And then what are you going to do when the study is done in terms of destroying the data so that it doesn't just sit out there and accidentally end up someplace that you didn't intend in a couple of years. So those are all the things that we're held to internally in terms of standards. And then as part of that, we have to produce and put in front of anybody that we interact with on the study a consent form. And on that consent form, it outlines the purpose of the study. Some of you have already received this. It also gives you the right to say, yes, I agree, I understand that I'm participating in the study. I want my name to be anonymous to the process, or you can even choose to be named in the process if you choose to. I reserve the right to review anything that I might say in this process prior to publication or use in any materials. So for instance, if we were to go and publish an academic journal article and we wanted to say, in conversations with one regulatory agency, and that's the way that we would need to use it if it was anonymous, one regulatory agency, we found that there was a great desire internally to try and create different kinds of social media and other kinds of internet tools to be able to communicate with the public. That's how we would have to leave it. But if you said, I'm okay with the agency saying, okay, then we could say the OGCC. And if you said, yes, I'm okay with using my name, then you could say, Frank Thorward at the OGCC told us. And so like you have the ability to be able to do all that. And then honestly, in addition to that, if we were to say like a quoted sentence from our interview or something, prior to even being able to use that quoted sentence in a paper, we need to go back to Frank and say, Frank, here's a paragraph in which we're going to use that quote that you gave us. Are you okay with that? Does it reflect the nature of how you were trying to communicate that particular point to us? And if not, please clarify, right? Or if you don't feel comfortable with us using that, then please let us know, and we just won't use the direct quote. So those are all the levels of control that you have as participants to the study. And then the thing about Noah's process and the filmmaking process is that we actually aren't using any direct quotes, and we're not using any direct names. She's producing the narrative based on things that she's gathered from various points of data and interviews with people, and then we're just asking people to provide input on that, and that shapes the narrative. But we don't actually have anybody's names or anybody's quotes in the film itself. And in terms of whether or not you will have access to the data, you all have access to, so for instance, if you wanted a copy of the transcript that came out of an interview, Frank, and you were the one that was participating in that interview, we're happy to supply that transcript to you because that is your data that we collected in the process of that. And in terms of what access you would have to things that come out of the study on the other end, everybody would obviously have access to the films. Everybody would obviously have access to any of the published materials that would come out, even if they are in peer-reviewed journal articles that you might need to have institutional access for. We're happy to supply copies of those as well. So I don't know if that answers the scope of your question, but happy to expand more.
No, it's okay. It does make me ask though. At least one meeting I recall, I'm not sure, maybe two. Noah was there with others and videotaped the entire meeting. I think that she was at another meeting in which she recorded the entire thing, and of course she gets access to all the meetings we have because we record all of our meetings. How is that going to be used in this this process? I mean, you're going to be hearing names, you're going to be seeing people, if all that's going to be broadcast in your video. So how does that fit into what you just told me about anonymous and so forth?
Yeah, those recordings were, the reason you saw me stop coming in with a camera and start coming in with audio instead was, and later not come in with anything at all when I realized they were being recorded and I could have access to that, is that the video would help me determine who was saying what, because there are a lot of voices going around and that was hard with audio before I knew you all. None of that video will be a part of this. That was for my background purposes at the time. So my intention is not to use anyone's name or any of the footage that we've collected. The intention is to use the messages, the concepts, the perspectives that are coming out, the discussions that have been really interesting, and how they've evolved over time. And how some of these decisions have gotten quicker as you've already covered that ground and like formed opinions and decisions about them. These decisions become quicker. All that is interesting to the process of how a regulatory structure evolves and as far as how that stance kind of takes shape.
Just to expand on that too, I mean, in terms of what we actually did with those videos, and if we were to show up with, or even the videos that we gather from, things like today, where these are pre-recorded or recorded rather, and then we can access them later. We take those videos and we bring them into software in which we code them, meaning that we go through them and we say, this particular topic was about well spacing exemptions. This particular topic was about, a new permit review, whatever it may be. And then we use that to be able to inform the films, the narrative of the films. So I put a link, and I don't know if you had an opportunity. I'll put it again here for those who didn't see it, to this Risk Bites, and those are not our films, those are not our videos, but you can see those are pretty much direct representations of what they will look like. And you can see in those kinds of films, there's sketches, there's somebody speaking over the sketches to try and explain a particular topic, but there's no film in there that is of a person speaking. There's no film in there about a meeting that's happening. We may, choose to put like an image of a well pad or something in there at some point. But, if that were the case, then, just to be able to show somebody is supposed to draw it. But if that were the case, we would ask who provided us with that image permission before we could put it in there. And so I think that, the videos are for us being able to inform the process, but they're not the material by which our films are going to be made.
So it doesn't seem like the video that you produced about 3 years ago called Coconino fits this model. Was it something that was done outside of this project you're currently in, or where does that fit into? It was, I guess, sponsored by the School for Future Innovation. Can you give me any more background about that? That video was a 6-minute video about 3 years ago called Coconino.
So that was produced separate from my lab. It was produced, and well, two things. I won't say separate, but I'll talk about the relationship between that film and my lab. That film was produced by Noah and 2 other students that were taking a film class over in, what was the school that was in the film school, right, Noah?
The Walter Cronkite School for Journalism. Right.
So that was a film class in which they had to pick a topic and then produce a film on that topic. And at that time, Noah and I had been talking about her wanting to get involved in the helium research. And I said, well, here's a really interesting topic that's happening right now related to helium extraction. And so that's where that came out of. And then I was helping Noah trying to understand helium extraction to inform that film by putting her in contact with people that we were talking to at that time, by trying to provide as many documents that we had available in terms of what was happening and trying to identify locations that they could go to do filming where helium extraction was likely to occur. And our intent with building on that film originally was, well, here's a film that tells the perspective of the concerned community. Now, what would film number 2 look like? Well, could we do a second film that would be, here's the perspective of the regulatory agencies, or just OGCC, for instance? Could we do a third film that is, here's this perspective from the geologists, right? And then we decided that that actually wasn't really the best approach, because all that was doing was still atomizing these groups, right? It was saying, here's this film, and here's this film, and here's this film that are representing different opinions, but they weren't actually putting them in a conversation with each other and trying to figure out what the differences of opinion were and disagreements and how to come to some common ground. And that's when we realized that that process probably was not the most effective way to do it. And that's why we decided to go this process instead.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Farbrenn.
Okay, so, and I apologize if the question was covered during, part of the discussion where everything was garbled on my end. But what you're talking about sounds well and good. I look at it now. I'll be up front. I've been a geologist all my life, so of course I've got one perspective on this. Most of what I see is from the perspective of concerned citizens in a community. And does that represent the entire community, or only the people that make their activism known? For example, I as a geologist have never been approached to talk. In one sense, you talk about as a regulatory agency, but we're here for that purpose. And what you're talking about to get the opinion of a geologist really should be expanded greatly from that single purpose as a regulatory agency. And nobody has ever approached me about being part of the discussion. Jim, your video, so I assume I'm not giving away your identity saying this. I'm not sure if he's ever been approached. And I don't have a problem with people having different opinions from me. My question is, in this whole process, are people like myself, like Jim, like the engineers on the drill, like the drilling company, also going to be able to be included? Or is it going to be the voices of concerned citizens in a town only. That, and I, what I see is the voices of concerned citizens, but not really of a broad variety of people that might have some input in this whole thing. And maybe you're getting towards that. And if you're, good for you. I'm just kind of commenting from what, I've seen to date. And I understand fully you can't take on everything all at once, but you kind of understand my point. I hope I've explained it clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you hit the nail on the head there, which is we're in a transition point right now where this project is intended to do exactly what you're describing. And so Noah, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you have actually been making efforts already to move in that direction and how you plan to do that even further in coming months.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I can't give names, but I have spoken to an industry geologist. I think he calls himself he's a helium specialist in geology with a geology background as a consultant to the industry. I have spoken to a couple of industry operators. And yeah, this next stage is, I kind of wanted a chance to wrap my head around what this project is before reaching out in earnest for feedback. And so I feel like I'm there now, and that's why I'm here today. And that's why I invite you. And the commissioners on the commission I'll be reaching out to by name, but I also invite, as I said, my email address is in the chat here, and I do invite anyone else, and we'll take recommendations from commissioners for who else to speak to, from anyone in the study about who else to speak to.
And I think your point is well taken too, that we don't, Noah and I were talking about this previously, that we don't see the commission as a black box, right? There's a variety of people here with different areas of expertise and different opinions. And I think that that's the reason you have a commission, right? Like you want people to have different backgrounds to come together to make decisions on important matters. And so we want to make sure that a variety of voices on the commission are represented, but also, we also do not see these as one-dimensional agencies. We see scientists, geologists as having their own areas of expertise, and we have, I don't want to say a separate bucket, but a separate category within the ways in which we've identified stakeholders that bring the scientific opinion and perspective to the table. And while we've started to do some outreach in that direction, we're realizing that we do really want more people to be able to fill those roles in this project. And we also have a few people identified in the geological survey that we'd like to reach out to in this process as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. Point out that one thing I've really come to appreciate being on the commission is the legal viewpoint. Also, and we do have a legal beagle here, the two of them actually, that would be good contacts to be sure and have that point of view.
And another point that you raised, which we're very aware of, is that we also don't want to black box residents of the Holbrook Basin, right? We realize that we need to expand out to talk about, what do the ranchers think about this, the really large landowners? What do the small Mormon communities, think about? Residents from those communities think about helium extraction. What do the indigenous communities that are, right on the edge of, the areas around petrified forest and even some of the helium-related activity that's happening in the Navajo Nation? What are their perspective on this? And so we have plans in the works to be able to do a lot of that kind of engagement well, to expand beyond just to again, open up each of these categories further to realize that there's a variety of opinion within each. And I also, just for full transparency, want to say that with a colleague of mine here, just submitted a $500,000 National Science Foundation grant that if we get it, it would give us 3 additional years to do exactly this kind of research. And in that proposal, we straight up said in that proposal that our intentions are to do engagements across all of these stakeholder groups to be able to continue this work. So if we do get the funds, then that would be phenomenal. And it would allow us to do some of these things that I'm describing, and also hopefully produce some additional opportunities to do these informational projects and products that perhaps the commission would get behind.
This is Commissioner Thorwald. I'd like to follow up on Commissioner Firebrand's comments. I used to live in the White Mountains. I lived there for 16 years and worked with all the communities from Springerville to Holbrook, Snowflake, Taylor, Show Low. and the other areas in between. And there's a lot of people in the businesses in the communities, jewelers, attorneys, doctors, grocery store workers that I know that I communicate with regularly that have different opinions that have not been asked about this. But also, this is, I find this, it's like asking for jurors in a court about how are you going to come in and be on our jury? What have you already heard? And in the White Mountain Independent and other publications, there's been a lot of publicity about this. And so some people are skewed with respect to that. So it's the old saying of trying to close the gate after the horse has already gotten out is an issue. And how do you will you handle that?
Well, I mean, to be fair, there's only so much that myself and a couple graduate students can do, right? Like, we're not a regulatory agency. We're just a couple of researchers, and we can't talk to every single person in the Holbrook Basin as much as we'd like to, right? And so what we're seeing here is an opportunity not for us to do all of that outreach, but for us to create better pathways by which regulatory agencies such as the OGCC can hear from residents and create those doors that might be more accessible so that the agencies can be in better direct contact with those people, right? So in other words, it's not our job to do that, frankly. It's the job of the process of regulatory processes and of permit approval processes and public input and public comment processes to do that. So how do we make that more efficient and more informed, right? That's really our goal here. And so, of course, we can only do a representative sample of individuals with perspectives to be able to get there. And then the process really needs to kind of take a life of its own beyond that point.
Commissioners, staff, is there any additional questions?
I have no additional questions.
Go ahead, Administrator Turner.
No, I say I do not have any
Oh,
additional.
you do not. We don't. I have one other for the AG's office. Jay, is there any issues for any of the staff or commission members to participate in this individually and or as the commission itself formally?
Well, there are conflict of interest laws, and there's also protection of confidential information gained during your service on the commission. I discussed this briefly with Dennis. I'm thinking of, everybody can look at it if they want it when they get a chance. ARS 38504 is what my recollection is. Prohibited acts of public officers or employees. You can't do anything for pay. It doesn't sound like you're going to, but you also cannot reveal information that is clearly declared confidential. That's 38504B. I don't feel like reading it out loud at the commission meeting, but that is the citation that people could look at. It doesn't sound like there's probably a lot of impact on just giving your general opinions or your general knowledge about the about your experience in the industry and with helium or whatever. That's the only thing I would have a caution about.
What about the commission? If we wanted to participate as the commission, we would vote on that. Or how would it be better just to have each one of the commissioners do it individually or staff? And in fact, how does that apply to staff with regard to the DEQ support?
I haven't thought about the commission voting to formally participate. So I think latter individual choice sounds good to me. I don't know if there's actually a legal basis for that, but with the caveats that are laid out in the 38504, which probably don't apply. But you have to be careful about revealing confidential information.
Of course. For my part, I agree with Commissioner Cooper. I think that we need to do this. We certainly need to establish better rapport and communications with the public. And I think this is a good mechanism to do that through. And as many of you know, we've been trying to give NOAA as much access as legally we can. And I think that this is the culmination of that. And I don't see, as long as all sides are fair and with the what we've been told today, I think we need to do it. And I would encourage the other commissioners to do that, and if staff can do it, for them to do it as well. Any other discussion on this item before we move on?
I just want to really thank everybody for their time. I know that this is a big chunk of a meeting that you have a lot of other things to deal with, so I just want to really appreciate giving us a platform.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item. Is it rare earth, Dennis?
Yeah, the rest of this should go quickly. The rare earth exploration, 2 wells that have been in prolonged discussion on many agendas about plug-in abandonment, is going to move forward more quickly now that Marta's back. Marta and I have inputted into a scope of work. There's a meeting going to be held with Marta, myself, and the point person, I guess, within procurement department at ADQ to go over that scope of work and then develop a bid package and whatever the next steps are. That'll be followed up by Marta. So it's moving forward. The Pollard Helium 36-1, another well for plug-in abandonment using the operator's performance bond. We're waiting on now, been waiting on for quite a long time, is approval of a right of access so that Butler Petroleum, the driller that actually drilled the well, can have permission from state land to go back up and access and plug and abandon that well. So that's the only thing that's hanging fire, and then they're ready to do the job, and then we're finished.
Hey, Dennis.
Go ahead.
Dennis, this is Joe Dixon for the State Land Department. That right of entry for Butler, that was sent out on Tuesday, the 16th. So they should be getting that pretty soon if they haven't already, and should be good to go.
Well, I'm aware of that, but it requires a signature by the operator. They have to send it back to state land. They have to sign it. And then once that's signed, I have to see a copy, and the operator has to know that it was signed by Lisa Atkins or her representative. And I haven't seen that yet. So they haven't started plug-in abandonment until they see that document. That was made clear to us before. So,
yeah. Well, they should be getting theirs anyway pretty soon.
Okay. In regards to Ranger development, the 34-7 NS, that's been a well that's been in process since September. When I say that completion operations are underway, what I mean is the stuff that an operator would do post-drilling is what they're getting after now. They've just had a lot of different and interesting interruptions to keep them from finishing up that well, but they're finally finished drilling and they're proceeding with the next steps. Prize Energy Resources does not have any drilling permits before the Oil and Gas Commission, but they do have an Aquifer Protection Permit, which has been appealed by the Center for Biological Diversity. So the Water Quality Appeals Board will be hearing that initially, but I don't have any dates as to when that's going to happen. Desert Eagle Drilling Company is a new entity that has applied for a drilling permit on some geologic structure about 9 miles, almost due south of Holbrook, on the large land holdings that's owned by the Aztec Land and Cattle Company. That permit's not been issued yet. I just received it very recently. And finally, with regards to Desert Mountain Energy, they've drilled 3 wells. I think that's been reported before. What's also been reported before is that the 26-1 is in a temporary restraining order until the operator appeals it to the state Supreme Court. The other 2 wells, or I should say all 3 wells, are officially in temporary abandonment status, so there's not going to be any further work done on those wells. The oil and gas regulations stipulate that if an operator goes into temporary abandonment status, they can't do any work on those wells, and they have to get approval from the commission before they go back and do any work. And that's the end of my report.
Any questions from the commission? Hearing none, let's move on to the next one. Item 4, report by the chairman. The web portal, where we're at with that, really hasn't changed much. We're still basically in the same state we've been before. That's on hold due to financial resources needs. The rule updates, I've spoken with the governor's office and with the Burke chairman with regard to that, and said that we would have all of that completed and to them by sometime this summer. And they have, the governor's office has looked at those, and they have no issue with it, that. So that will go on. We'll get the approval to move to that to GERP. The procedures manual and the SOPs, Dennis had some updates on that. And Dennis, you want to say anything on that?
No, there's not much to report with that.
Okay.
I've gone over with Marta where those are located in the files. I pretty much completed my part of those standard operating practices, which in ADQ parlance is called a standard work, before I left last August. So I've done a few tweaks. I've been back for these 4 months, but largely was completed by me last August.
Thank you. With regard to the website redesign, DEQ was working on that while Marta's been gone. She's reconnecting with them to see where the status is. She informed me that they have also been working on remote access for the DEQ staff, so we don't know where that's at. But if they did what they had indicated they were going to, we should be able to start have changes to our website very quickly. Marta, do you have anything else to add to that?
Nothing else to add at this point, but definitely by the next meeting, I think we will have some changes rolling out.
With regard to ADEQ, the director and I have met virtually a number of many times at this point since our last meeting, and with DEQ staff on a variety of topics. And our relationship is improving by leaps and bounds with that. And we'll be working with them even further as we go on through the summer after the legislative session is ended. With future presentations, we have not done anything at that point with respect to that, but we will intend to and have updates with on this more specific at the next meeting. With regard to federal grants, I have been in touch with the AZOGCC, and they put me in touch with the liaison, the AZOGCC, the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact, for those that don't know what that stands for, with EPA and the Department and DOE, Department of Energy and Environmental Protection Agency, and I've spoken with the liaisons on numerous occasions and had conferences with them and numerous other staff with regard to the grants and looking at that, and they gave us a download of lots of information, which I'm still going through, and I may be for several more months, just due to the large volume of information provided in those areas. And that it appears that there can be some things that would help with respect to the budget in that. I have not seen any federal legislation that would affect the commission at this point. There was some things that were going through the state, but they don't seem to have any impact at this point, but we will see, and I'll give you an update at the next meeting. Is there any questions from the commission with regard to that report? Hearing that, we'll move on to the call to the public. Is there anybody that in the public that would like to give any comments? Note that we, as commissioners, cannot reply or have a discussion with us, but we're certainly willing to hear what you have to say.
Martha Pierce.
Please proceed.
I'm Martha Pierce. I'm with Protect Our Water Arizona, and much to my surprise this past year, water is being traded on Wall Street. It is a commodity right now that's more important than oil or gas. And in my opinion, to allow an outside mining interest to use and take our water for any mining interest at this time seems a bit careless and against Arizonans' best interest. And you represent the people of Arizona at this commission. And in your name, the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, the word conservation comes into play. And the definition of conservation is the prevention of the wasteful use of a resource. And in this case, it's our water. And in the last 3 years, I've been attending the oil and gas meetings. I've never really heard any decisions made in the name of conservation. So maybe at this time, we should all kind of take a breath, stop, and pay a little more attention to the most important resource in our state, the water. After 21 years of straight drought in this state, water has more value than anything to Arizonans. We can't drink helium. Thank you.
Is there any other comment?
Yes.
Please identify yourself.
My name is Wayne Pierce. I'm with Protect Our Water Arizona. The oil and gas industry is a big player in the stock market. Now water is traded on Wall Street, just like oil, gas, and helium. Mining almost anything seems to take a lot of water, sometimes obscene amounts of water, and we just allow them to take as much water out of the ground as they want, seemingly with no limits or restrictions. All this while suffering a severe drought. And not only do they take all the water they want, but they often gamble with the water that they leave in the ground, the water we drink. They leave that water in jeopardy of contamination every time they use technology that uses toxic and sometimes extremely toxic chemicals. Sending toxic chemicals through pipes that go through, around, or anywhere near an aquifer, especially one with lots of really good water, is at the worst insane and at the best a gamble. No different than betting other people's hard-earned money in a poker game in the hopes of making a profit. All the latest well-thought-out safety measures and all the tools in your toolbox will not prevent mining accidents. Many accidents are small, whatever that means, and some of them are catastrophic. I certainly know that you know this, but sometimes it seems like you need to be reminded. And yes, I'm aware that I use some of the fruits of the oil and gas efforts. And then there's the #1 goal of a for-profit corporation, to make a profit that hopefully increases every quarter. and there can't be two number one goals. So at best, protecting the environment would be their number two goal. One more thing. We often hear about how briny and brackish water is useless for human consumption. It's useless until you run it through a desalination plant. Then guess what? We can drink it, and that gives it value. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Though to be fair, it's we the people who pay the salary of the person who gave you the opportunity to speak. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Hearing none, let's move on to the announcements. Is there any announcements? Hearing no announcements, do we have a motion to adjourn? I move that, yeah, go ahead.
Commissioner Cooper, I so move to adjourn.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooper, and I second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Firebrand, did you, we have enough anyway. We are officially adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.